Flick to link, link to flick.
My 7-year-old grandson sleeps just down the hall from me, and he wakes up a lot of mornings and he says, you know, this could be the best day ever. And other times in the middle of the night, he calls out in a tremulous voice, Nana, will you ever get sick and die? I think this pretty much says it for me and most of the people I know, that we're a mixed grill of happy anticipation and dread. So I sat down a few days before my 61st birthday, and I decided to compile a list of everything I know for sure. There's so little truth in the popular culture, and it's good to be sure of a few things. For instance, I am no longer 47, although this is the age I feel and the age I like to think of myself as being. My friend Paul used to say in his late 70s that he felt like a young man with something really wrong with him. Our true person is outside of time and space, but looking at the paperwork, I can in fact see that I was born in 1954. My inside self is outside of time and space. It doesn't have an age. I'm every age I've ever been, and so are you. Although I can't help mentioning as an aside that it might have been helpful if I hadn't followed the skincare rules of the 60s, which involved getting as much sun as possible while slathered in baby oil and basking in the glow of a tinfoil reflector shield. It was so liberating, though, to face the truth that I was no longer in the last throes of middle age, that I decided to write down every single true thing I know. People feel really doomed and overwhelmed these days, and they keep asking me what's true. So I hope that my list of things I'm almost positive about might offer some basic operating instructions to anyone who's feeling really overwhelmed or beleaguered. Number one, the first and truest thing is that all truth is a paradox. Life is both a precious, unfathomably beautiful gift, and it's impossible here on the incarnational side of things. It's been a very bad match for those of us who were born extremely sensitive. It's so hard and weird that we sometimes wonder if we're being punked. It's filled simultaneously with heartbreaking sweetness and beauty, desperate poverty, floods and babies and acne and Mozart, all swirled together. I don't think it's an ideal system. Number two, almost everything will work again if you unplug it for a few minutes. Including you. 3, there is almost nothing outside of you that will help in any kind of lasting way unless you're waiting for an organ. You can't buy, achieve, or date serenity and peace of mind. This is the most horrible truth, and I so resent it. But it's an inside job. And we can't arrange peace or lasting improvement for the people we love most in the world. They have to find their own ways, their own answers. You can't run alongside your grown children with sunscreen and chapstick on their hero's journey. You have to release them. It's disrespectful not to. And if it's someone else's problem, you probably don't have the answer anyway. Our help is usually not very helpful. Our help is often toxic. And help is the sunny side of control. Stop helping so much. Don't get your help and goodness all over everybody. This brings us to number 4. Everyone is screwed up, broken, clingy, and scared. Even the people who seem to have it most together. They are much more like you than you would believe, so try not to compare your insides to other people's outsides. It will only make you worse than you already are. Also, you can't save, fix, or rescue any of them or get anyone sober. What helped me get clean and sober 30 years ago was the catastrophe of my behavior and thinking. So I asked some sober friends for help, and I turned to a higher power. One acronym for God is the gift of desperation, G-O-D, or as a sober friend put it, by the end I was deteriorating faster than I could lower my standards. So God might mean, in this case, me running out of any more good ideas. While fixing and saving and trying to rescue is futile, radical self-care is quantum, and it radiates out from you into the atmosphere like a little fresh air. It's a huge gift to the world. When people respond by saying, "Well, isn't she full of herself?" just smile obliquely like Mona Lisa and make both of you a nice cup of tea. Being full of affection for one's goofy, self-centered, cranky, annoying self is home. It's where world peace begins. Number 5. Chocolate with 75% cacao is not actually a food. Its best use is as a bait in snake traps or to balance the legs of wobbly chairs. It was never meant to be considered inedible. Number 6. Writing. Every writer you know writes really terrible first drafts, but they keep their butt in the chair. That's the secret of life. That's probably the main difference between you and them. They just do it. They do it by prearrangement with themselves. They do it as a debt of honor. They tell stories that come through them one day at a time, little by little. When my older brother was in 4th grade, he had a term paper on birds due the next day, and he hadn't started. So my dad sat down with him with an Audubon book, paper, pencils, and Brads for those of you who have gotten a little less young and remember Brads. And he said to my brother, "Just take it bird by bird, buddy. Just read about pelicans, and then write about pelicans in your own voice. And then find out about chickadees and tell us about them in your own voice. And then geese." So the 2 most important things about writing are bird by bird and really god-awful first drafts. If you don't know where to start, remember that every single thing that happened to you is yours and you get to tell it. If people wanted you to write more warmly about them, they should have behaved better. You're going to feel like hell if you wake up someday and you never wrote the stuff that is tugging on the sleeves of your heart. Your stories, memories, visions, and songs. Your truth, your version of things in your own voice. That's really all you have to offer us. And that's also why you were born. 7. Publication and temporary creative successes are something you have to recover from. They kill as many people as not. They will hurt, damage, and change you in ways you cannot imagine. The most degraded and evil people I've ever known are male writers who've had huge bestsellers. And yet, returning to number 1, that all truth is paradox, it's also a miracle to get your work published, to get your stories read and heard. Just try to bust yourself gently of the fantasy that publication will heal you, that it will fill the Swiss cheesy holes inside of you. It can't. It won't. But writing can. So can singing in a choir or a bluegrass band. So can painting community murals or birding or fostering old dogs that no one else will. Number 8, families. Families are hard, 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 no matter how cherished and astonishing they may also be. Again, see number 1. At family gatherings where you suddenly feel homicidal or suicidal, remember that in all cases, it's a miracle that any of us specifically were conceived and born. Earth is forgiveness school. It begins with forgiving yourself. And then you might as well start at the dinner table. That way you can do this work in comfortable pants. When William Blake said that we are here to learn to endure the beams of love, he knew that your family would be an intimate part of this, even as you want to run screaming for your cute little life. But I promise you are up to it. You can do it, Cinderella. You can do it. And you will be amazed. 9, food. Try to do a little better. I think you know what I mean. Number 10, grace. Grace is spiritual WD-40, or water wings. The mystery of grace is that God loves Henry Kissinger and Vladimir Putin and me exactly as much as he or she loves your new grandchild. Go figure. The movement of grace is what changes us, heals our world. To summon grace, say, help, and then buckle up. Grace finds you exactly where you are, but it doesn't leave you where it found you. And grace won't look like Casper the Friendly Ghost, regrettably. But the phone will ring or the mail will come, and then against all odds, you'll get your sense of humor about yourself back. Laughter really is carbonated holiness. It helps us breathe again and again and gives us back to ourselves, and this gives us faith in life and each other. And remember, grace always bats last. 11. God just means goodness. It's really not all that scary. It means the divine or a loving, animating intelligence, or as we learn from the great deteriorata, the cosmic muffin. A good name for God is not me. Emerson said that the happiest person on earth is the one who learns from nature the lessons of worship. So go outside a lot and look up. My pastor said you can trap bees on the bottom of mason jars without lids because they don't look up. So they just walk around bitterly bumping into the glass walls. Go outside, look up. Secret of life. And finally, death. Number 12. Wow and yikes. It's so hard to bear when the few people you cannot live without die. You'll never get over these losses, and no matter what the culture says, you're not supposed to. We Christians like to think of death as a major change of address. But in any case, the person will live again fully in your heart if you don't seal it off. Like Leonard Cohen said, there are cracks in everything, and that's how the light gets in. And that's how we feel our people again fully alive. Also, the people will make you laugh out loud at the most inconvenient times. And that's the great good news. But their absence will also be a lifelong nightmare of homesickness for you. Grief and friends, time and tears will heal you to some extent. Tears will bathe and baptize and hydrate and moisturize you in the ground on which you walk. Do you know the first thing that God says to Moses? He says, take off your shoes. Because this is holy ground, all evidence to the contrary. It's hard to believe, but it's the truest thing I know. When you're a little bit older, like my tiny personal self.
My photo taste is the Pinterest, because they are the best.
Welcome to Spotlight. I'm Robin Basselin.
And I'm Ryan Gertzma. Spotlight uses a special English method of broadcasting. It is easier for people to understand, no matter where in the world they live.
What makes you afraid? Do you fear the dark, or do you fear being in small places? These are common fears. However, people have many different fears.
And fear is a difficult emotion. Fear can control a person's life. However, there are also many ways that people can control their fear. Today's spotlight is about dealing with fear.
What happens to our bodies when we are afraid? To help answer that question, let us imagine a woman named Mary.
Mary is afraid of riding in cars. She is afraid because she was once involved in a bad car accident. When Mary gets into a car, she begins to sweat. Her skin becomes wet and she feels hot. Her heart begins to beat quickly. Her whole body feels tense.
This physical reaction to fear is called the fight or flight response. When you are afraid, your body prepares itself in one of two ways. Either it prepares to fight what is making you afraid, or it prepares for flight, to run away from what is making you afraid.
Many things are happening in the brain during this fight or flight response. Scientists think that fear is processed through a place in our brain called the amygdala. The amygdala decides whether a situation is safe or unsafe.
In Mary's case, her amygdala decides that riding in a car is unsafe. It then releases a chemical called cortisol into Mary's body. This chemical brings Mary's fight or flight response. It causes Mary's sweating, increased heart rate, and tense body.
Often, fears are strongly linked to memory. We remember a bad experience and become afraid. In this way, we have learned to be afraid.
One scientific study tested this process and a possible way negative memories can be removed. In the study, scientists taught small animals, called mice, to be afraid of a particular place. When the mice entered the particular area, the scientist gave the mice an electric shock. This produced a negative memory for the mice. They became afraid of the area where the shock happened.
Once the mice were afraid, the scientists began their research. The scientists began giving the mice a chemical called CAM-K2. This chemical removed the mice's memory of the negative experience. The mice's fear of the area where they received the shock was completely gone.
Scientists hope that one day they will be able to use the chemical with people. It may help people who have had a difficult experience that now makes them afraid. It could be used with soldiers who have negative memories of war, or with victims of violence.
But many people are concerned about completely removing negative memories which cause fear. One reason for their concern is the issue of truth. If a person forgets about a difficult experience, they may come to believe something which is untrue instead. For example, if a victim of violence forgets about her experience, she may come to believe the person who attacked her is safe.
After a community has a terrible experience, they often promise they will not forget what happened. Their promise is to remember and learn from the difficulty. They promise to learn and become better people. If we remove people's memories about terrible events, we may also remove their chance to learn from the experience.
People are also concerned that forgetting difficult events would make forgiveness impossible. A part of forgiveness is choosing to defeat the negative memories we have about someone hurting us. If we do not remember a negative event, can we truly forgive the other person involved?
Daniela Schiller is a scientist that studies fear. She is also concerned about completely removing memories. So, instead of removing fearful memories, Schiller studied ways to change a person's emotional reaction to a fearful memory. Her study about fear used people. The scientist taught people to be afraid of a yellow square. Whenever the person saw the yellow square, they received an electric shock, just like the mice in the other study.
After the scientists taught the people to be afraid, the scientists sent them home. Then, the next day, the same people came back to the testing location. Now, the scientists worked to help the people unlearn their fear. They called this process extinction training.
The extinction training began with scientists showing each person the yellow square again. This made the person remember the negative experience, and they were fearful. However, this time, they were not given a shock. The scientist repeated this process many times without shocking the people.
This extinction training changed the emotions connected to the negative memory. The study showed that by experiencing a different emotion with a negative memory, we can stop being afraid of a situation.
Let us think back to Mary. To help Mary stop being afraid of riding in a car, scientists might try two things.
The scientists who worked on the first study in today's program might try to remove Mary's memory about the car accident with medication. After using the medication, she would no longer be able to remember what happened. Therefore, she would no longer be afraid of riding in cars.
The scientist who worked on the second study might help Mary replace the fear she feels when she gets into a car. They would have her remember the car accident. This would cause her again to feel fear. Then, they would have her take several good trips in a car. These safe experiences would replace Mary's fearful memory of cars. She would still remember the car accident, but she would not feel the same fear that she used to.
Fear is a very powerful emotion. A lot of fear can make it difficult to live a normal life. But there is much we can learn from the experiences which cause fear. Defeating a difficult experience can make a person stronger than they were before the experience. A community can listen to those like soldiers or victims of violence who struggle with fear. By hearing about their negative experiences and their fear, the community may become more careful about going to war. They may become more careful to protect one another from violence.
So, what do you think about dealing with fear? Should bad memories be completely removed from a person's memory? How do you deal with fear and negative memories? Have you learned from a negative experience? We would love to hear your thoughts. You can email us at radio@english.net.
The writer of this program was Sarah Kidd. The producers were Josh DeGroot and Mark Drenth. The voices you heard were from the United States. All quotes were adapted and voiced by Spotlight. You can find this and other programs on our website, www.radio.english.net. This program is called Fear. We hope you can join us again for the next Spotlight program. Goodbye.
Flick to link, link to flick.